Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the third installment of our How Prepared Are You for Denali webinar series. And I'm excited. You can see Dr. Tracee Metcalfe is with me today, and I'm excited about the conversation that we have prepared for you. Um, just a couple Q&A things before we get started. So we'll try to keep today's session to 45 minutes, including Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat as they pop up. And then at the end, we'll take 10 or so minutes to go through those. And depending how many there are, we may end up going a little bit longer. Um, if you're, I know a lot of people aren't able to join, it's close to the holidays if you celebrate Christmas. So this recording will be sent out in a couple of days and available on YouTube for everyone to watch. So excited to have Tracee with us. And Tracee and I met on Monaslu in 2015. So we've like known each other and been keeping up on climbing and what we've been up to in the mountains for 10 years, which kind of blows my mind. And today we're going to share her expertise as a expedition doctor and a physician and a high altitude mountaineer. But also we'll be sharing just some tips and things that we've learned along the way as we've ventured in the mountains. So just a quick introduction. I'm Lisa Thompson. I founded Alpine Athletics in 2018. And since then, we've been coaching mountaineers of all levels to prepare for whatever their adventure is. And then more recently, just a few months ago, I purchased the guide company Mountain Madness. So I'm excited to have just a bigger footprint and share the mountains with more people and help them prepare. I personally have climbed Everest, K2, and the Seven Summits. And it's a pleasure for me now through Alpine Athletics and Mountain Madness just to share what I've learned with the mountaineering community and to host webinars like this that really helps us think differently about the way that we prepare for a big mountain. I was thinking this morning that I remember climbing Rainier one of the first times and watching a climber turn around, and he seemed like he had the strength to continue, but really lacked, I think, just preparedness. And that really stuck with me watching this guy turn around who seemed, strong and fit and able to climb a mountain like Rainier. And that really is what propelled me to start thinking about preparation from a holistic point of view. That was why I founded Alpine Athletics and why I've started to focus on precision preparation as a way to just look not just at physically how we're getting ready, but how we're ready mentally. We'll talk today with Tracee about being medically ready and what happens to our bodies at elevation, and understanding all of those things, I think, is a big part of what I get a lot of pleasure out of in terms of coaching and guiding people in the mountains. So that's why I'm thrilled to have Tracee joining us. I'll let you do a quick intro yourself, Tracee.
Yeah, hi everyone. It is hard to believe, Lisa, that we've known each other for 10
A long
years.
time.
It's a long time. I have worked as a high altitude physician on Denali, as well as Everest, Choyu, Makalu, and Manaslu. And then my love of being a high altitude physician sort of transformed into really wanting to focus on climbing. And last October, I became the first US woman to complete summiting all 14 of the 8,000-meter peaks, which was a big accomplishment for me.
And
And
just for like mountaineering and women in general. Like,
yes, for sure, for all
yeah.
of that. And so I'm really excited to work with Lisa. I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that I agree with Lisa that just the mental preparation, there's other parts of it that I think are really important. And I think Lisa was kind of cutting edge a few years ago when she was starting to give her clients kind of mental preparation. And, I know that she personally used that, and I was really impressed and incorporated that into my own preparation. So for me, I'm excited to be part of this program because I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in multiple disciplines to help climbers be as prepared as possible for Denali.
Yeah, I was thinking I had a meeting with an athlete yesterday who's preparing for Everest, and he has sort of like we've kind of like ad hoc this same program for him by like reaching out to Anthony, to you, and to Alyssa. And so it's interesting that it's just kind of evolved as we start to think about preparation differently, and it's exciting now for me to just make it like a package and hopefully what we do as we prepare. So. Okay, let's get down to it. This is what we're going to cover today, and this will be specific to Denali, but a lot of the things we talk about you could, apply to other big peaks. We're going to talk about the most common reason that climbers struggle on a mountain like Denali, and we're going to sort of frame that all around medical readiness, and how to optimize your health during training, but also on the mountain. We'll talk about acclimatization strategies that work, and we're going to dig into Diamox, which is one of the most, I think, common questions I have about a medication and what, if you should take it or not and how to take it. Um, and then Tracee and I will both talk about our sort of personal medical kits and what we carry with us when we embark on an expedition. And finally, we'll think about how to know if you're really ready for a peak like Denali when you head out on an expedition. And like I said, we'll leave some time at the end to talk about any questions that pop up along the way. So I like to start with data. My background's in engineering, so I like to make decisions that are grounded in data. And the National Park Service in the US keeps track of all the statistics for the mountains in Alaska. Denali, of course, is the one people are interested in. And when you're in Talkeetna and you go to the National Park Service office, there's a board that says how many people are currently on the mount, like Denali and Foraker, and what the success rate is. And I remember when I think it was 2012 that I climbed Denali, and the success rate was like 40% when I started my climb. So if it's a very daunting statistic. Today, the more recent average is somewhere around 50 to 52%. But there's a number of reasons why people fail to summit that peak. And we'll talk about some of those today and talk about what you can do to get yourself ready and hopefully have plans to mitigate those. I also just plug for Alpine Athletics. Since we started in 2018, I've been keeping track of our success rates on all the peaks that our athletes have climbed. And I'm super proud to say that our success rate on Denali is 80%, which is far above what the typical success rate is. So we'll talk, that's why we're doing this, to talk about, how to get to that 80%, how to bridge the gap from 50 to 80. So looking at research from the Denali Medical Research Project, about 30% of the climbers on Denali experience some kind of acute mountain sickness. Most of those things I think are preventable or at least understandable. And maybe Tracee, I'll ask you quickly, what are the most common symptoms of AMS for someone who's not been in elevation or not familiar with what that feels like?
Yeah, so AMS, acute mountain sickness, the most common symptoms would be headache, nausea, lack of appetite. And I've heard it described, and I think it's accurate, that it really kind of feels like a bad hangover. And so, yeah, you just headache, nausea, lack of appetite are the main symptoms of acute mountain sickness.
Yep. And it's important to know those. And also, I think to be able to discern between like dehydration and other things that may have similar symptoms and know how to treat each of those. Um, the other common thing, and we've all dealt with this if we've climbed, especially out of the US, is gastrointestinal issues. Very common. And like I've seen them just totally derail someone's climb or at least make it so much more difficult than it has to be because you're sick and dehydrated and losing, liters and liters of water a day because of that dehydration or diarrhea or whatever the other symptoms might be. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the other category that pops up commonly on Denali and really other big mountains is just frostbite and other cold injuries. I think that people sometimes underestimate how cold Denali can be, especially on summit. And so having a really strong plan for recognizing and then also managing cold if that becomes an issue. And just things that are simple that I think people overlook are like making sure that you have well-fitting boots that aren't too tight and gloves that fit well and a glove system that all works without too much constriction, because that constriction can cause a lack of blood flow, which makes you much more susceptible to frostbite or some sort of cold injury. So
Yeah.
those are the main things that we see. I don't, yeah,
Oh,
anything.
I was just gonna agree with you about cold and underestimating it. I mean, after climbing all 14 of the 8,000-meter peaks, I would say probably the coldest I've ever been was on Denali. So
Really?
it's a very cold mountain. So I agree with you, Lisa.
And was that on your summit day, or were you? Was it one?
No, it wasn't. My summit day was actually pretty sunny and warm, but it was just moving lower on the mountain. There's, more humidity on Denali than on a lot of other
Mhm.
peaks, and so it just feels colder with that moisture in the air. But yeah, it's a very cold mountain, and I've definitely seen some serious frostbite on it, more so than I have on other mountains. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yep.
agree with you.
Maybe we can pause here because I forgot to ask you about your work on Denali when we did the intro. So you worked on Denali for a couple of seasons as a physician. I've forgotten what you were doing.
Yeah, so Denali has the National Park Service has paid climbing rangers that are basically search and rescue uh, people, and they also employ volunteers. And the volunteers get paid a little bit, but that's not really the important part. So I worked with as a volunteer medical person with the climbing rangers 2 different seasons in 2012 and 2013, and that was like where I kind of got my first taste of high altitude medicine as a doctor.
Mhm. Do you remember like what were some of the common things you saw? Was it anything different than what we just talked about?
No, I mean, I think we'll get to it. I think frostbite, acute mountain sickness for sure, some of the other altitude related illnesses, and then just blisters becoming a really big
Yes.
issue. And even one thing that I saw a couple of times on Denali was actually like a boil, which is like an infected kind of pimple
Mhm.
on the back where the pack was rubbing. And in one case, it was so bad that the person had to end their climb. So
Wow.
yeah, so different things, but yeah, those are
And
some
surprising things. That's
surprising things for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but I think it's good to share those because then people can at least know what they are and have a plan. And I would
Yep.
imagine it ended that person's climb because it got infected and it was not going to heal at that elevation in that environment, and they had to turn around.
That's right. It got infected, and I think had it been addressed sooner when it was just, starting as a small kind of area that was rubbing, it
Yeah,
probably didn't need to end the person's climb. But I see this time and time again is that climbers are sometimes embarrassed to tell their guide or to tell someone what's going on, and so this particular person just waited too
yeah,
long because he was embarrassed. And so that's one thing I want to say is, tell your guides what's going on. Even if it seems like it's such a small problem, it's good. The sooner you can make your guide aware of it and address it, the better.
yeah. I totally agree with that. Okay, we're kind of getting into it here, but that's good.
Yeah.
So the point is that like readiness is more than just spending a bunch of hours at the gym or walking uphill with a heavy backpack. It's all these things together. It's your fitness, it's your technical skill and experience. It's being aware medically of what's going on and what can happen and having a plan for that. And that to me equates to a safe summit and hopefully a little fun. Like, there should be some enjoyment in the mountains. I know we're all sort of addicted to type 2 fun, but I really believe that the more prepared you are, the more you're going to enjoy being on the mountain. Part of why we all do this is because we love being in these beautiful, pristine, wild places. And so hopefully it gives you a chance to enjoy them a little bit more. So let's get to the checklist. I'll hand things over to you at this point, Tracee, and you can kind of walk through these list of categories for medical readiness before you head on onto a big mountain.
Yeah, so I think some of this list is pretty good is good. One is you kind of your immune system and just having, it is robust as it can be, which means, in the time leading up to it, trying not to catch a cold, getting enough sleep, eating well. Digestive stuff is super important, and we'll get more into that. Having a strategy like knowing if you're going to use Diamox or any other medicine to help with your acclimatization. Preventing and managing injuries during training, beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here, but so important, because if you push yourself too hard and get some sort of tendonitis or nagging injury, it's going to shut down your training. And so it's really important not to get kind of an overtraining injury. Thinking through the cold weather, which we already kind of talked about a little bit, and I agree, personal hygiene is super important. I think a lot of sicknesses can be minimized by like proper hand hygiene. When I talked about the kind of boil on the patient's skin, like proper cleansing of that area probably could have
Mhm.
helped. So, yeah, that's a good checklist there.
And let's get into some of them a little bit more. So you mentioned immune system and we're like in cold and flu season in the US. And I want to underscore, like, as a coach, this time of year, now it's a little more specific for people who are heading to Aconcagua in a few weeks, but like staying healthy during training is so important. And like I see so many people like go to a concert and like or get on a plane and not wear a mask or think about their immune system, and then it like the flu this season has been really harsh, at least in the Seattle area, and it will knock people out for 3 weeks. And if you're just 5 weeks out from leaving for a big climb, it really can have a negative impact on your preparation. So that's my little plug as a coach. But from your perspective, Tracee, how do you think about having a resilient immune system if you're about to climb?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you just said. I also think that labs can help us at some point early on in your training journey, getting some baseline labs, making sure vitamin stores are good, making sure you don't have a thyroid problem, iron stores. Some people require iron supplementation, especially when they're training at altitude. Sleep is huge. I mean, that is when your body repairs itself. So, all that hard training you do, your body cannot really recover if you're not getting good sleep. Stress management, really important. And yeah, high training volume, low sleep means
Wow.
that your immune system is compromised. And I think it's also you're set up to get kind of these overuse injuries and different things.
Yeah, sleep is so critical, and the older I get, the more I realize that. But also, if you are training hypoxically for Denali or any other mountain, you need to be extra aware of of your sleep quality, because we know it's going to be compromised because you're sleeping in a hypoxic environment. And so just adding that to the equation, I think, makes you even more likely to have a compromised immune system. And it's important to be tracking like HRV and other metrics just to see how your body's reacting to all that stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my favorite one, gut health.
So I think gut health is super important, not just on climbing peaks, but we're recognizing as a medical field how important our microbiome is, how important our gut health is, and that is definitely magnified when you go to high altitude. I like to think about the fact that at high altitude, your oxygen is lower, and so your gut is getting also seeing less oxygen and getting less blood flow. And so any problems you have ahead of time are going to be magnified most likely with altitude. I think one of the key things is I love the idea of practicing what you're going to eat before you get to Denali, because yeah, if you have a really healthy diet, plant forward, lots of fruits and vegetables, don't ever eat meat. And then suddenly you go to Denali and the only choices are cheese, high fat foods,
Lunch
salami.
meat.
Yeah, which really is the reality, and that's starting to change some. but you're most likely going to get diarrhea. And it's not necessarily that you're sick, it's just that your gut microbiome is not used to processing those foods. So practicing ahead of time, eating foods similar to what you'll eat on Denali. I think whatever your summit snacks are going to be, um, practicing with the whatever type of high energy goo chews and things like that.
Mhm.
Hydration is really important when we're at altitude because our respiratory rate is so high and we're breathing a huge volume of air. You're losing up to 2 to 3 liters of liquids just from your respiration. So increasing your fluid intake. I like that. Pee clear. That's right. It's not always going to be clear, but that should be the goal. And then I'm a big proponent of taking probiotics, figuring out one that kind of works for you, and then taking it while you're climbing. For me, that I didn't have that knowledge when I was on Denali, but for sure when I traveled to Pakistan and other areas where sanitation was an issue, I think that being on a probiotic was extremely helpful.
That's a good tip. I've actually never done that, but that makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that for my next travel. Okay, so a big deal, of course, is acclimatization, right? This is, built into, if you're going with a guide company, it's built into your itinerary. People are very commonly now acclimatizing at home, which is not an exact match for being at real elevation. But let's just talk about what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. I think the tried and true way of if you have an opportunity to go to the mountains ahead of time and actually climb in Colorado or on
Yep.
Rainier, somewhere where you can get to elevations of like 10. I mean, if you come to Colorado, you can easily get to 10,000 to 14,000 feet in elevation. And I think there's nothing like um, uh, acclimatizing naturally using mountains. I
Yep.
do think that the hypoxic tents are also really helpful, and I know it's not realistic for everyone to be able to come out to Colorado for 2 weeks ahead of time to help acclimatize. So I do think that the hypoxic tents really do work. But it is not going to do it just because you're sleeping in a hypoxic tent doesn't mean that you're going to do great.
Magically.
So and I like what you said, Lisa. I think the one thing I've seen with the hypoxic tents is just that your recovery is blunted because you're
Mhm.
sleeping with your oxygen being low, and so you are a little bit more susceptible to injuries, illnesses, just because you're not getting that good recovery that you would if you were just sleeping at sea level, not in the tent. Yeah, and I guess the slide also, Diamox doesn't solve everything, and we're going to talk more about that. So
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah,
Maybe you can give us like a quick physiological overview of what is happening. So we're at our home elevation, whether like for me, that's sea level, for you, that's I think 9,000 feet. You travel to an elevation that's significantly higher than what your body's accustomed to. What starts to like what's actually happening physiologically when we're acclimatizing?
yeah. So when you first get to a higher elevation, your oxygen saturation is going to drop. So you're going to have less oxygen traveling in your blood and to your tissues. And the way the body deals with that is kind of threefold. It tells your brain basically tells you to increase your respiratory rate so that a normal resting respiratory rate at sea level might be like 8 breaths per minute. And
Mhm.
as soon as you get to altitude, that's going to go up to like 12 to 15 breaths per minute. So your respiratory drive is going to go up, and that's going to help you get more oxygen. And it's going to lower your CO2 concentration. And then at the same time that's happening, your kidneys are getting signals that there's not enough oxygen. And so your kidneys do two things. The first thing your kidney does is it starts increasing urine production. So you'll notice a lot of times, right, when you get to altitude in the first couple of hours, you're peeing a lot. And basically, the kidneys are having you pee out bicarbonate, which is making your blood slightly more acidic, which is going to further increase your respiratory drive. So basically, just think your kidneys are going to start making urine, and the reason they're doing that is to help increase your respiratory rate to deal with that low oxygen without getting too scientific. And then your kidneys also start secreting something called epogen, which is a hormone that tells your body to make more red blood cells. So those are the normal things that kind of happen. I don't know if you want me to go more into what
No,
can
I
go
think that
wrong.
it helps just understand what's happening physiologically. And those extra red blood cells, I think they live for 120 days. Is that right?
They do, and it takes that's the slowest part of the acclimatization process. So that takes days to weeks. Once
Hmm.
your body starts secreting the epogen, it still takes time to churn out enough red blood cells to make a difference. And that is something that happens by sleeping in the hypoxic tent, is that you're stimulating your kidneys to secrete the epogen, and so you're already in your red blood cells are already going to be increased by the time you arrive at altitude.
Right. And I think it's worth pointing out too, like, I think it's great when people want to travel, but like traveling to 10,000 feet for a couple of days is not enough to get the full effect of acclimatization if they're leaving for Denali in a few weeks.
Agree.
Yeah, it's got to be really carefully like thought out and timed so that you have time to build the red blood cells and they're still going to be in your system when you get to the mountain. Some
Yeah,
important things to
I
talk
agree.
about. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit to just recovery and injury prevention. Recovery, so critical. I, for many years, just ignored it. I thought, like, I'm just going to push as hard as I can every single time. But I've since shifted my perspective. And to me, recovery is actually when you get stronger. Like, you spend time, breaking down your body, physically tearing muscle fibers, and then you need that rest and that recovery for your body to grow and get stronger. But talk a little bit more about injury prevention and what we can do during training.
Yeah, no, so I totally agree. My thinking has changed too as I've gotten older and more experience about how important recovery is. I think the biggest thing is slow progression, right? Like
Mhm.
not and that's where Lisa's coaching really comes in, is not starting with like trying to do a 10-hour day in the mountains in your first couple
Right,
weeks. Like that takes time. The way I think about it, and now I'm kind of getting too much into the coaching thing, is, if you're doing a big day once a week, you're increasing it by like 10 to 20% at most each week. And so
right,
what I see from people getting injuries is just that they're trying to do too much volume too fast, or they're trying to like go out with a 50-pound pack when they haven't started with like a 15-pound pack and a 20-pound pack. And so they're getting musculoskeletal injuries from just, so what I would say is just increasing the length of time or the load that they're carrying
yep.
too fast.
Yeah, I see that a lot. I think we all love shortcuts, but there's some things that we just haven't figured out a way to shortcut. And preparing for a mountain or any physical endeavor is one of them. And I've worked with people who've tried to, put together a training program on their own and they did exactly what you described. They like shortened the time and they were like, I'm just going to jump in at like 60% instead of starting from zero and slowly building and having this really solid base. And the other thing that that base does, I think, is makes you more resilient, right? Like you have this just like baseline fitness that you can use and just build from. And if you do have an injury, I find that you recover faster if you're starting from a place of already having some level of fitness. Okay, let's get into personal care and hygiene. So you mentioned blisters, and I think it's worth talking about again because it's such a little, like it is such a little thing, but it has such big impacts if it happens when you're on a mountain.
Yeah, I can't. I feel like I've seen a lot of trips ruined by blisters, and they can, it's not just a nuisance, right? If you mismanage a blister on somewhere like Denali, it can turn into a serious infection. So, and I can't say it's 100% preventable because it's not, but there's a lot you can do to prevent it. So,
Yeah.
I I think absolutely you need to be training in whatever boots that you're going to use to climb Denali. The more time you can spend in those boots with the socks you're going to use,
Yep.
and clean socks. I also, wool works best when it's kind of fresh and fluffy and clean. And if you're wearing the same socks, for the whole, I don't know, for 10 days on the expedition,
Yeah.
that's not good. So it's a balance of, not necessarily having a new pair of socks every day. But if you get extremely sweaty one day, going on and moving to the new pair of socks, and I
Yep.
don't know that there's any scientific evidence for this, but I have always tried to save one pair of socks that's clean for the summit day so that like I'm gonna have the maximum warmth from the wool and like less chance of what do I want to say, of getting a blister. And for
Yeah.
me, like blister management too, for me that looks like taping my feet with Luco tape because I know where I'm gonna have hot spots. And so even though I've broken the boots in, I have to pre-tape my feet. I don't know if you have issues like that.
Yeah. I have issues because I have bony ankle bones. And so I will actually put like a hydrocolloidal pad on my ankles before, especially definitely before summit, but even before big days to give me a little bit of like cushion and blister prevention. And I do it the night before when my feet are like dry. They might be a little cold, but like dry. I get everything all taped up the night before so I don't have to worry about it in the morning.
Yeah, agree. Always the night before.
Yeah.
And those colloidal patches are awesome. I think I don't use them the way Lisa does, but if I have a blister, I find them really invaluable. But you don't want to be using them for the first time when
Yeah.
you're on Denali.
Yep.
So that's probably enough about blisters. I am menstruation management. I wanted to put in there. As females, it's something that we have to deal with. There's many options for how you want to deal with it, which is probably beyond the scope of this. But some people, if they're on birth control pills, will actually take the birth control pills back to back so that they're not going to have any menstrual period when they're on the mountain. And that's obviously something you want to discuss with your doctor ahead of time. If you're not going to do that, just thinking about how you're gonna manage the waste, having the products you need. I will say that I was shocked when I was working on Denali, how many women would come into 14 camp just to ask me if I had tampons. And I was kind of like, well, so it's something to think about ahead of time, not to be surprised by. And I will say,
Yep.
I think the surprise probably happens because, maybe you always get your menstrual cycle at 28 days, but with this stress of travel, all the
Mhm.
stuff, your hormones are not going to behave the way they normally do. So you could think, oh, I'm not going to get my period till the end of this, but you actually get it 7 days in. So just thinking about it ahead of time, I think. And then people who are menstruating are losing blood. So a lot of times it's female athletes that require like an iron supplementation as part of their training. Do you want to
Yep.
add anything to the menstruation or should I?
I would add I always have at least one tampon in my first aid kit because you just like never know if like when it's going to happen or when it might happen to someone on your team. And I've looked, I think Tracee, you and I have talked about this. I can't find any research or evidence of this, but I swear that like your period, and it's probably just like the hormonal fluctuations that you mentioned, cause your period to start at random times when you're on a climb. It's happened to me more than once at elevation when I like wasn't planning to have it, shouldn't have had it by my normal schedule, and like all of a sudden there it is. So I would say if you're menstruating and you're climbing a big peak, just plan like you're going to have your period. Just take what you need with you, even though it might not be the normal schedule for it to happen while you're on the mountain.
Yeah, totally. Okay, personal hygiene. Having hand sanitizer, using it multiple times a day, that's gonna, help prevent colds. It's gonna prevent GI illnesses like diarrheal things. And I just don't think you can use enough hand sanitizer to be
Mm-mm.
honest. Every time before I'm gonna put like every break that I take before I'm gonna reach into my bag and eat my peanuts or whatever I'm gonna eat, I want to like scrub my hands with some hand sanitizer. Um, and I think, yeah, that just can't be emphasized enough. Dental care is not something everybody thinks about. But if you have like a partially impacted tooth, or, some kind of nagging dental issue, the changes in pressure associated with going up in altitude can make that worse. So it's sort of like, when you're on an airplane and it takes off or landing and your ears pop and you can feel all that that same stuff is happening when you climb on a mountain. And I've definitely seen people have a minor dental thing that became a major dental thing at altitude and required them to be evacuated and ended their climb. So going to a dentist ahead of time, just making sure that everything's healthy in your mouth. And then skincare at extreme. So we talked about the cold already. I think I would just add with the skincare that it's really hard to get adequate sun protection on Denali. No matter what SPF sun cream you're using, the sun is so vicious up there and you will get sunburn. So you want to have prepared with a cream that you know works for you, that you're not allergic to, that's, nothing like that. And then I think, getting it inside your nostrils, having a really strong lip balm. I've actually, it's happened to me breathing so hard on Denali that the inside of my mouth got burnt. So, like my tongue and the roof of my mouth from the snow reflecting off the
Mhm.
glacier. So, the sun's just brutal. I think the more that you can cover up, in addition to using sun creams, is great. I don't know that I've seen someone's climb ruined by a really bad sunburn, but I've certainly seen it made extremely less fun by dealing with a severe sunburn. So it's
Right.
not something to mess with.
And it's preventable, right? Like just having a
Yeah.
strategy, testing it out, being really mindful about it, and not compromising that. I think, we can sometimes get apathetic and think, oh, I don't need to apply more sunscreen when, it's been an hour and you've maybe wiped your nose or like changed your layers and more skin's exposed than was before. So just always being diligent about it is key. Okay. Now, should I take Diamox if I'm climbing Denali?
Um, okay, so we could talk about how Diamox works.
Yeah.
So Diamox actually augments your natural acclimatization process. So when I talked about the kidneys making more urine, Diamox is a diuretic, which means that it tells the kidneys to make more urine, and it's going into that whole cycle of it's decreasing your bicarb, so you're peeing out bicarbonate, which is making your blood slightly more acidic. And then the way the brain deals with that is it tells you it tells your lungs to breathe more and increases your respiratory rate. So it actually works in a quite like physiologic way. It's mimicking what the body is doing itself. And so in that sense, I think that's quite nice. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't make it so that you don't have to still gradually increase your altitude. Yeah, it's not a magic pill, and it doesn't get rid of altitude sickness. I do find let's see, I'm looking at the slide. It will increase your oxygen saturation not only during sleep, but also with activity. Um, let's see, what's the next slide? Because I don't
Yeah,
want.
the next slide talks about like what you like when to consider it.
Oh yeah, okay. I think more things to know about Diamox is you definitely don't want to be taking it for the first time when you go to Denali. It's something to try at home, even though you're not at altitude, just to see what it feels like, to see how much more urine you're going to be making. People get what's called paresthesias, which is like numbness and tingling in their fingers, and that's
And
completely
your nose.
normal. Yeah, yeah, and nose, lips. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's completely normal. That's an expected side effect of Diamox. So if you felt what that feels like for the first time, not on Denali, I think it feels it feels less scary when you get those symptoms there. Like who should take Diamox? I mean, I'm actually a big believer in Diamox. I
Mhm.
think that it makes climbs more enjoyable. Um, and I think for most people, it could be useful. So I guess what I would say is I'm going to start with who doesn't need it, which is a rare group. Um,
Yeah.
and that's people who have been to altitude. They know they do well. They know they acclimatize quickly. I definitely have some friends that, they've never taken it and they never will.
Hmm.
Um, People who have sulfa allergies, that's a little bit that probably requires more discussion. That was the old thinking was that if you had a sulfa allergy, you absolutely couldn't take it. And it's probably more nuanced than that, but in general, that's a contraindication. If you know you're going with a company that you're gonna, take like a full 4 weeks to summit Denali, doing multiple carries up and down, you may not need it. I think other people who tend not to like it are, I would say, men, older men who are already having to get up and pee a lot during the night, tend to not like it because you are peeing more and you are having to drink more water. And so that's the main reason I hear, and I hear that more in men than women.
Hmm.
So let's see.
Yeah, and the next is just like a protocol. We wanted to talk about protocols for taking it. And I know you helped me really like think about the time of day to take it, which helped um, lessen the impact of having to pee so frequently.
Yeah. So I think the dose is really important, right? So
Hmm.
125 milligrams, either once or twice a day, is the appropriate dose. And a lot of times, doctors that are not familiar with Diamox will just look up something on the internet. And I've seen people on as high of doses as 500 milligrams twice a
Yeah.
day. And people feel terrible at that dose. So getting the dose right is really important. You want to start it ideally, I would say 24 hours before you're going to altitude, but you can also start it at altitude. So if you get to 14, you think, oh, I'm doing a slow acclimatization protocol. I don't need to use Diamox. And then you get to 14,000 feet and you're really having a lot of acute mountain sickness. You can absolutely start it then. So it's
Mhm.
important not to think, oh, well, because I didn't start it 24 hours before, I can't take it. Staying hydrated. We talked about the numbness and tingling. And yeah, so as far as like the timing of it, the way that I try to take it is first thing in the morning when I get up, and then in the afternoon when I get to my new camp. So that way, because the increased urination is maximal, like in the 6 to 8 hours after you take the dose. So if you take it at 9 p.m. at night, you are going to be up all night peeing. So just um, thinking about timing it so
Timing it.
that the peeing is
Yeah.
less inconvenient.
Yep. And we've talked about some of these things. So taking too high of a dose, I agree. I talked to a lot of people who just, go to their PCP who isn't familiar with Diamox or being at altitude and gives them way too big of a dose. Anything else you'd add, like mistakes or tips to think about?
No, I think we covered that.
Cool. So then let's get a little more general. Tracee and I have talked about like what are the things we typically carry with us personally when we're climbing. So you could see the list here. Anything you'd like underline or point out, Tracee, for people to think about?
No, I mean, I think this list is good. I think it should be done consulting with a doctor. If you're part of the
Hmm.
precision program, you're going to get to consult with me and we'll go through it in a lot more detail. Because Diamox, dexamethasone, antibiotics, those are all prescription medicines. I think one thing I'd like to highlight is that ibuprofen, acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, those things they're very safe at altitude, unless you have a reason that you shouldn't take them. I'll give that preface. But a lot of people sometimes have this notion that if they're getting an altitude headache, they don't want to take ibuprofen because it might mask something with the headache, and it's actually better to go ahead and take it and get rid of the headache. If someone's going to get high altitude cerebral edema, which we haven't really talked about, taking an ibuprofen is not going to mask the symptoms of it. So I tell people to be, go ahead and use ibuprofen. It's fine. It's going to make you feel better. I think the antibiotics, that's something we would, I try to work to come up with a strategy so that we have like a couple of antibiotics that will cover different things. The big things that we see are like diarrheal illnesses, sometimes respiratory infections like a bronchitis or even a sinusitis, something getting in your sinuses, urine infections because people sometimes aren't drinking enough and not having good sanitation. I think the nausea medicine is super helpful, ondansetron. That's a prescription medicine also. Pepto-Bismol, I really like. So for diarrhea, I kind of have like a two-pronged strategy. If I start to feel a queasy stomach, I will start with taking Pepto-Bismol personally and see if that's going to kind of manage it. And then if it continues to progress to full-blown diarrhea, then Imodium, and then knowing whether it's something that requires an antibiotic or not. And that's probably more than we can do in the next few minutes.
Yeah.
Personal prescriptions in excess, I agree with that. So whatever you normally take, making sure you have more than enough of it, especially because sometimes people don't think when you're going to cache a load up higher,
Uh-huh.
you might need to have the prescription, right? Like a dose of it at the camp you're sleeping at and at the higher camp. So just not, you don't scrimp, what am I, don't try to save weight with not,
Right.
bringing enough of your own medicines. And then I think we've talked about the blister thing enough.
Yeah.
What am I forgetting, Lisa? Would you?
I think those are all really good ones, and there's obviously a lot more to say about dexamethasone and nifedipine, and that can be another private conversation that you have with folks. But just knowing that like these are the base meds I think people would want to take with them before they go on any expedition.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So all this is about medical readiness, and I've promised a checklist. So this just sort of highlights the things we were just talking about. And everyone who's signed up for the webinar will get this so that you can download it and make your own checklist. We talked a little bit about HRV and resting heart rate, and we have great tools now to track those. So make sure during training, you or your coach is keeping an eye on those things. I think they can be really good pre-indicators of, I mean, the HRV measures the stress in your body. And so if you see that start to drop and you can't explain why, it could be that your body's starting to fight something. So keeping a really good eye on those, I think, is important through training. On the mountain, I've looked at a lot of HRVs and resting heart rates for people that are climbing, and they're not going to be in the normal ranges. So just don't expect that when you're on a climb. It is interesting to track though how they change. Gut health and immune health, just making sure that you haven't had any illnesses. If you do have like just an inkling of something, I would get it taken care of right away. Whether that means taking, I don't know, what are the flu meds we take now? Can't think of plant. Anyway, like just making sure you're meeting with your doctor and managing those quickly and not letting them linger, and having all the vaccines that you need. Insurance, I was talking to an athlete this morning about this, and we didn't really dig into this too much, but making sure that you've got a medical kit that you've reviewed with a physician. Hopefully that person is Tracee, who understands high altitude medication and what your body is going to be enduring on the mountain, but also making sure that you have good travel insurance and good rescue insurance. I sort of put that in this like realm of health while you're on the mountain. For those of you that are in the US, the American Alpine Club has great insurance that you can buy, or are eligible for through your subscription, which I think is a great resource. And then thinking about acclimatization. So it was great, just high level. Thank you, Tracee, for explaining what's happening to our bodies physiologically when we're at elevation, and just thinking about what your plan is going to be for acclimatizing. And if you can test it out ahead of time, I think that's really important. It just eliminates one more novel thing when you're on the mountain. So we want to shift gears like this, we've been talking about precision preparation, which is the idea of including really of thinking differently about how we prepare for a big climb. And by considering this full, comprehensive, very integrated approach, today we just focused on one piece of that, which is medical readiness, but there are many more modalities that precision preparation brings together for you. And I like to think about them in three categories. So there's physical preparation, there's mental preparation, and there's physiological. And the program that we've put together combines all of those into one integrated system. So you're working with experts, including Tracee, who understand what it's like to be on the mountain, have probably climbed it themselves. We're coordinating all of that expertise for you. So that's medical preparation, physical training, nutrition. I forgot to put mental resilience on here as well, but also breath work. So that the point is that you arrive to Denali or any mountain and you know that you have literally done every single thing that you can do to be ready for that mountain as possible. So that whole system, here's what it looks like in terms of like that package. So physical training and coaching through me and the Alpine Athletics team. I'm very excited that we've just finished a mindset program, which is called Peak Performance. It's an 8-week program, so you'll be involved in that as well. You'll receive that 8-week program, including some check-ins with me to talk through what you're learning and the tools that you're creating for mindset. Anthony LaRubio, who we talked with last week, will coach you in terms of breath work and protocols that you can use on the mountain. Tracee will be consulting medically, and then my team will be coordinating all of this seamlessly for you. We broke this down into what it looks like by month as well. So it's meant to be 6 months. You'll start with doing a medical screening. I will get your training plan set up. You'll work with Alyssa to develop a nutrition strategy. You'll start to talk to Anthony about breath work and incorporating that into training. And during that first 2 months, you'll start to investigate some mindset tools with me as well. And then as we get further into your training and further into the 6 months, we'll just keep dialing that in more specifically as we, as a coaching team, learn about you and, kind of where you're starting from, what your needs are in order to get you ready for Denali. And then before you leave, we'll do a readiness score just to confirm that we'll probably do it multiple times along the way to confirm that you're on track. We'll do a final mental resilience test, which is really fun. And you'll have your final medical consultation with Tracee. So this is a package that we've put together, and I thought it was good to like just say like this is what these things would cost. And I've worked with other athletes, and this is sort of where I got the idea to do this program, where I've worked with someone right now actually who's getting ready for Everest. And so he's working with me and we're coaching one-on-one. He also wanted nutrition support from Alyssa. He worked with Anthony to do some breathwork training. He's just recently started doing this mental performance and resilience coaching. And so it occurred to me that this is how to really prepare for a big peak like Denali. And if you were to go get those things independently, it would cost you about $14,500 for the time that you're spending for that 6 months. And we're putting that together for you. We're charging like barely 10% premium to pull everything together and incorporate it for you and to be like the mastermind behind your preparation so that you don't have to think about it. The point is that you want to focus on readiness and we focus on what it takes for you to get from where you're starting to where you need to be. The people that have invested so far in precision preparation for Denali are people who most of them have tried Denali before and something didn't go well. And sometimes it was just weather, but sometimes it was their preparation. One gentleman, it was like all about mental resilience for him. And all of them are on Seven Summits tracks, and they want to make sure that they get it right this time. And they're, confident about investing the money that it takes to make sure that they're working with the experts so that they have every single resource available to them to be safe and prepared. for Denali in 2026. So we have different payment schedules. You can see the price here, 46.33 per month. That's for 6 months. We're starting this month. We have people already ready to go in the cohort, and this will last for 6 months. We can extend it depending on when your Denali climb is because we want it we want the program to conclude when you leave for Talkeetna, obviously. We're only going to work with 10 people. I think, we're a very dedicated group of coaches, and we want to make sure, especially because we're doing it for the first time, that we're really giving everyone the support and the attention that they need so that we're all successful together. One last look at your team of coaches and who you'll be working with. If you've been following these webinars, you've met all of them except for Alyssa. We weren't able to coordinate time with her. But these are the people that I have worked with and do work with when I'm preparing for any big mountain that I climb. So if you want to chat more about the precision preparation program and talk about next steps, we've put together a readiness review questionnaire for you, which we'll drop in the chat. We'll send it out later in an email, or you can access the QR code here. What we did was take this, it'll take you about 10 minutes to complete, but we took the screening questions that we ask every Mountain Madness climber that identify your baseline, your potential concerns, anything that might need attention before Denali. And we normally only ask these questions if someone's committed to a climb, but for the next, like through Friday, we're going to open this questionnaire up for anyone if you want a little more insight into where you're at now and where you need to be in order to be ready for Denali 2026. Once you've completed that questionnaire, I'll get a copy of it, and then we'll schedule some time to go through it and talk more about not just readiness, but your climbing history and your goals, and to make sure that precision preparation is right for you and meets your Denali timeline. And then, assuming that all goes well, then we'll begin the program later this month as soon as we have everybody sort of on board and ready to go. So we're at the top of the hour, and I want to leave some time for questions. Let me just ask Andrew if there's any in the chat that we want to maybe just take a couple while we have Tracee.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we have a question coming
Okay.
from School Jumpier. So the question is, what's the difference between acetazolamide or Diamox and dexamethasone and their use difference, if any?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So acetazolamide and Diamox are the same thing. Diamox is just the brand name. Acetazolamide is the generic, and that's the one that I talked through that helps your body kind of acclimatize naturally. Dexamethasone is a steroid, and dexamethasone is used mostly once you already have acute mountain sickness or to treat. It's used less for prevention and more for treatment. There some people use dexamethasone as prevention. I don't agree with that strategy. For me, dexamethasone is something that you've gotten into trouble. You're having something like high altitude cerebral edema, and we're giving you that to kind of basically shrink the swelling in your brain and give you time to get down safely. So for me, I'm pretty conservative. If somebody's sick enough that they're taking dexamethasone, they need to be going down the mountain too. So they're kind of different things. Diamox is for prevention, dexamethasone is for treatment.
Yeah, that's a good question. We hear both of those drugs a lot. Um, Anything else, Andrew?
Yes. Second question is before I go, proceed on that one. So Jenny
Yep.
Duarte, I'm happy to realize that I'm already doing all of this on my previous expedition. I have
Good.
a I have a tip about sunscreen. The mineral ones really block and avoid burns. It's my experience. My question is, how many hours up and down on summit day?
Oh gosh. Thanks for the tip about training or about sunscreen. I agree with the mineral ones. I want to say my summit day was between 10 and 12 hours. Tracee, what do you recall or what did you experience?
I think that's about right. I'd have to look back at my notes, but I remember starting in daylight and finishing in daylight for sure, so it wasn't longer than that.
Yeah. Um, I think so as a coach, that's what I prepare people for. And I think it's sort of ironic that most mountains end up with a 10 to 12 hour summit day, but you should be ready for that. You should have the food for that. You should have sunscreen for that. You should have trained to be, on your feet moving for that amount of time. And hopefully you're surprised and maybe it takes a little bit less, but preparing for 10 to 12 hours, I think is important.
Agreed.
Good question, Jenny. Thank you. Anything else, Andrew?
That's pretty much of it. So,
Okay,
if,
great. We're at exactly 12 o'clock. So thanks for hanging with us for a little bit longer. We'll, as I said, send out the QR code. Let me just go back to that if I can, if anyone wants to start taking the readiness review questionnaire now. I'll get a copy of that once you've completed it and then reach out. And thank you so much, Tracee. I feel like every time we talk, I learned something. So I appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us and look forward to working more together through precision preparation. It's really going to be fun to work on that together.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us today. See you later. Bye bye.
Bye.